Hello and welcome to today's webcast using popular third-party messaging platforms for customer service. I'm Alex. I will be your host for the day. And before we start this session, I have a few housekeeping rules for everyone who's attended. The session will be recorded, so you will receive a recording and a copy of the Forrester report that we're going to talk about later, shortly after the session, within 24 hours at the maximum. If you have any questions for our lovely panelists and guest speakers today, and for Julie from Forrester, then please use the chat function of GoToWebinar. We'll have a panel discussion later and we'll have a Q&A at the end. So please submit your questions. A big thank you to those who also pre-submitted their questions. We received a number of questions that were submitted ahead of the webcast. So thank you very much for that. And with that in mind, I quickly just want to introduce you to IMI for those who are not aware of who we are. We are passionate about customer interactions. We believe that every customer interaction matters, and we have been providing global enterprises and businesses worldwide for the last 20 years with customer interaction management solutions. We are now part of Cisco, and we're excited about going on to a new journey with Cisco. And that's all about IMUS and what you hear about us today. We have a lovely set of speakers today. You see all of them on video. We want to have it interactive, but we have Julie Ask with us from Forrester today. Wave at us, Julie. Hey, fantastic. We've got Alex Campbell, our own very Campbell from IMI Mobile. There we go. We've got Gemma from British Gas with us. That's good. And we've got, last but not least, Stuart Jones. Hello, Stuart. Great stuff. Yes, with that in mind, what we have planned for you today is just 4 basic things, or 4 small things, if that makes sense. We're going to hear from Julie, first of all, about one of the reports that she's written. We'll have about a 20 to 25-minute panel discussion where you can engage with the speakers, where you can ask questions, but we've also stimulated discussion between us. And towards the end, we're going to hear from Julie again, where we're going to be at 2025 or 2030, and any further questions that will be posted throughout the end of our Q&A. On our next slide, so I would like to hand over to Julie. Julie has written a report about popular third-party messaging platforms for customer service. The report was launched in January earlier this year. And I think it gives a good guidance and practice for large businesses how to implement messaging channels. Julie, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Can I please hand over to you?
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's get started. And thank you everyone for joining. So we're going to talk a little bit about the role of third-party platforms in customer service. So let's go forward. All right, so I think one of the first questions that IMI Mobile put to me is, why did I do this research? What was the catalyst? And so I say the first thing, and probably most importantly, there was demand from our clients. Forrester's inbound inquiries on the use of mobile messaging and text-based chat for customer services has been growing at a rapid clip for years, and then it really accelerated back in the spring of 2020 when folks in the call centers or the contact centers went home and more consumers were forced into digital channels. And certainly this pandemic, even if you take a step outside of the contact center for a moment, the pandemic accelerated digital transformations across industries and geographies. And this efforts included adding messaging and chat. Messaging gives you a way to break through the clutter, and chat was not only like a channel choice for consumers, but also we saw, in some industries like retail or even in travel, taking frontline staff and putting them into contact centers virtually, let's say, to handle chat. And it was a great way to handle all of the inbound inquiry coming from customers. And then finally, last, people talk about why I'm an analyst and, what keeps me in the game, so to speak. And I've been covering third-party messaging platforms for a long time, almost 10 years, back since 2014. And I feel like there was all of this buzz around WeChat back in 2012, 2013, KakaoTalk in Korea. And I've kind of been patiently waiting for something big to happen outside of Asia. And I think we finally may be here in the US today. So that's how we got started. Next slide, please. So if we look a little bit at what happened in the past year, I feel like this is kind of a year that we all want to get past, but digital transformation efforts, really accelerated. We saw retailers spending on marketing to drive sales and set up appointments. So this goes a little bit into the initiative, from a message actually into a chat. With folks at home, we saw the need for digital process automation and robotic process automation became even more essential because we couldn't move around paper and send things. So overall messaging volume is increasing, which is one of the inbound things to a contact center. We saw offshore call centers be offline, and some of them still are today or have diminished capacity. And when we look at all of kind of the big frame of things, SMS is still the largest channel. It's still the workhorse, we would say, of messaging as well as chat. But the third-party platforms are growing quickly, in part to the availability, and certainly they're becoming more feature-rich. And absolutely one of the top things that we saw, especially in customer care, is that brands are starting to leverage SMS as part of the IVR deflection. And in doing so, they've seen customer service scores as well as agent efficiency go up. The other thing that we've seen happen as well is brands needed ubiquitous mechanisms to engage consumers facing difficulty, especially in financial service, whether it was banking or utilities or really the services that are critical or essential to consumers. How do we literally keep the lights on and keep people in place during difficult times? And any company in the services industry with which you would speak would say, yeah, the volume was off the charts, and we weren't staffed to handle it purely via phone. So we had to shift more into self-serve models as well as chat. So if we start to think about the case for using direct messaging or instant messaging with consumers, I think the first thing you should know is your customers use direct messaging. When we talk about building any kind of technology or adding any kind of technology into the mix, we always talk about start with your consumers. Where are they using the internet? What devices, what platforms, what channels, and how are they using the internet? Is it through text messaging or voice or a GUI interface? And so one of the first things you need to do is always think about where are your customers? And here you can see when we're looking at some of the social media and messaging sites or apps that customers are using at least weekly in the United States, and this is recent data just from a couple of months ago, you can see that quite a few are, second to Facebook only is, well, owned by Facebook also, is Instagram, right, which has chat, Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, Twitter, WhatsApp, LinkedIn. A lot of these, Google and Apple, down towards the bottom of the list, a lot of these are now on the list because yes, and consumers are using this primarily to talk with their friends, talk with family, but their ability or interest in using that to talk to firms is also growing, as we'll see in the upcoming slides. So one of the things we saw, as I just referenced, is that consumers increased trial and usage of direct messaging during the pandemic. So when we put the question to consumers, and this was a third-party study that was done in conjunction with Forrester, since the pandemic began, how has your use of the following communication channels changed specifically when getting in touch with businesses or institutions? And here you can see quite a few people tried third-party messaging or chat on a business's application, text, chat on a website for the first time. And then other and equally important, we saw dramatic increases in the use of these channels by consumers who had already adopted them. So this also makes the case of when you're thinking about where to deploy and what kind of interactions or interfaces to put in place for your consumers, what are they already doing? What are they using? What are they comfortable with? And what are their preferences? Because here you're beginning to see, well, it's hard to get people to try something for the first time. Once they get in and they use it and they have a good experience, they're likely to increase that usage over time. So one of the things we've also observed, though, is while we've seen this a lot of interest from consumers, is firms are beginning to adopt chat, but too many don't. And here we see there's, in the question that we put to about, I think it's about 200, 300 executives as part of our digital experiences survey, is which of the following best describes your firm's state of development of customer experiences for the following conversational interfaces? And it doesn't surprise me that we see chat on your mobile website or app as the top. Certainly live chat has been on desktop websites for a long time, and companies have begun to bring that over into the mobile medium. And so it's more than a third have it on their website today, and another third are piloting it. And then lower on the list, for a lot of good reasons, is third-party instant messaging platforms, where we see 21% have adopted and about another quarter are trialing that. And if you ask, well, why is there a difference? One, just chat and live chat has been around longer. In some industries, especially where consumers have needed help, whether it's utilities or banking or insurance, they need to be in an authenticated environment. We get into health care, and then there's HIPAA regulations about the privacy of information. And yeah, the third-party messaging platforms are beginning to work through some of these issues, but it's not a baked product. It's, everybody's always on a journey, and some of these platforms have a ways to go to support some of the needs that enterprises have today. So when we look then, and so we take that 21% or that 20 or so percent of enterprises that are using chat on third-party platforms, and then we ask them, you mentioned that you're using or piloting functionality on a third-party instant messaging platform. Which are the ones you're using? It's not surprising that the kind of the first to open businesses, Messenger leads today. So Messenger launched, I would say it's like 3-4 years ago. At one point they had over 100,000 different brands using Messenger. If you ask why WeChat is so low, this is primarily a US-based audience with some representation in Europe, as well as Australia, but this is not, I think we have 0 responses from China, so I'm impressed that even 11% are. But here you can see where companies are investing money, and we currently have this survey in the field now, and I would also expect to see higher adoption of Google. That's made some real efforts in the past year to roll out their platform to enterprises, and steer folks onto the platform and do a lot of education around that. But this is primarily where things are today. The fact that a lot of people are in Messenger also fits with Messenger or Facebook being more of a branding or a marketing platform, and consumers taking the next step where they don't have to be in an authenticated environment necessarily to ask questions about availability of a product or to do simple things like order a pizza. So when we talk about this, certainly there's a cost associated with expanding the number of channels or the number of platforms in which you serve your customers, but you have to keep in mind there's a lot of clear benefits to using messaging. One of the first, and I think because also we get a lot of calls and inbound requests from contact centers, is first is just increased agent efficiency. If you've got an agent on the phone, they're most likely going to be focused on one conversation at a time. Once you get them into a chat environment, we've seen numbers like easily, agents are handling about 5 to 7 conversations. That certainly comes with having the right talent and the right training and the right set of expectations for the customer, but certainly increased agent efficiency is one of them. Elevated customer satisfaction. You may ask, well, what is that relative to with the pandemic? And we talked about so many people being home or folks in contact centers being offline. This is about, getting people out of a long queue to talk on the phone and saying, hey, there's this other channel if you want it. And when you get those people that have shifted from waiting in line or an AVR and being on the phone and moving into a third party or a messaging channel, they're like, yeah, this is great. I'm not waiting and I'm feeling like I'm making progress. So the customer satisfaction has gone up. You're giving consumers more channel choice. When we look at how consumers in the US or abroad want to engage with internet services, again, this goes back to knowing your customer and how they want to engage, especially when we look at younger adults. They're more likely to want to use texting or text-based chat. They're more likely to want to multitask. That doesn't mean that folks over the age of 60 aren't going to use it, but especially if you're targeting a younger consumer, those in their 20s and 30s, this is a channel choice they're going to want. Reduction in call volume that feeds off of some of the other benefits, and then finally improved business results through not only efficiency, but chat. As companies have rolled out new services like scheduling an appointment to come in to get a wedding dress or a suit fitted or shop at Apple, having someone pull somebody through that purchase funnel, like literally through chat, has absolutely increased the business results and improved them for companies across a wide range of industries. So Alex, that's all the benefits, but brands do face some headwinds when working with third-party platforms, and that's why they're going to count on a lot of their partners to do the work. There's a lot of channel choice that can lead to fragmentation. In fact, if you're a Fortune 500 company, you're a Global 1000 company, you can't just necessarily go to Apple or go to Google and say, hey, I want to be on your platform. You've got to work through one of your partners. And then your partners also do you the favor of helping mitigate some of the challenges associated with that fragmentation by understanding and keeping up to date on what you can and can't do on WhatsApp versus ABC versus Google, and simplifying that experience for your contact center agents. Platform use varies by geography, right? If you're in Asia, if you're in China, it's WeChat. If you're outside the United States, Brazil, it's probably WhatsApp. And if you're inside the United States, we're just kind of ramping up there to using this more, right? But we're more likely to be, is likely to be on ABC or Google as we may be on WhatsApp or some of the others. Consumers may need to opt in to engage brands. Most of these platforms, and there's a couple of exceptions, forbid you from sending out messages to customers through these channels to engage them proactively. It's viewed as intrusive. And so there's still a little bit of a clunkiness, or there's a bit of friction in getting somebody from an IVR, onto the phone and getting them to opt in to talk to a brand on these third-party platforms. It's a work in progress. Platform owners insisting on elevation to humans, not just chatbots. When you get on a third-party platform, most of them are going to be very, very protective of their brand and the experience, so you can't deliver a poor experience. So some of them, like ABC, will say, hey, if they get so far and it's not going well, right, you need to have somebody, a human, so to speak, or somebody in your contact center as a backup. And the final thing is customer service not being the focus of each third-party platform. Platforms like Snap and Instagram and Facebook are going to be more oriented towards branding and getting somebody into the purchase funnel than they are going to be around resolving customer service issues. So there are headwinds, they're all things that we can work through, but it's not like you just click your fingers and it's easy tomorrow.
Yeah, I can, and as a matter of fact, I can already see a couple of questions popping up that we might address after you finished your slides. But I think you're going to share a personal experience now with us.
Yes, because this can go horribly, horribly wrong.
Horribly wrong, yeah, when brands get it wrong, right? Yeah.
Yes, what happens when you over automate and you get it really wrong? All right, so Alex, if you flip the next slide, I'll tell you this story. So about 6 or 8 months ago, I live in California, if that helped for context, and my husband was having a big birthday back in early October. So I diligently booked a vacation rental with this is the vacation rental, this gorgeous pool up in wine country. We had a chef hired, it was going to be amazing. And then because we live in California, there's global warming, California was on fire. And there was a 500,000 acre fire, 300,000, 500,000 acre fire raging just a few miles from this property. And when you go to it's called the Glass Fire, and it was one of many fires that we had in California last year in the fall of 2020. But they were under grave threat. I mean, you can, I think a picture is, what is that phrase, worth 1,000 words? You can see the firemen here. And if you look, and where the house that I had rented was in Kenwood, you can go on to the next slide and just flip through. You can begin to see here, there's a couple of things happening. Like, one, it's on fire. So the home has no electricity, it's covered in ash. The second thing, if you look at the middle slide here, is you can't get there because the roads are closed and they're blocked by the National Guard because they need to keep the roads free for emergency vehicles. So literally, it wasn't going to be possible to get to the home. So when you go to the next slide, what was happening though, because this vacation rental place had automated, they just started sending me all of these timed and scheduled, based on my date of arrival, messages with the how to use the guest app, how to get into the house, what the door code is for the house. On the right-hand side here, they're reminding me to socially distance and wear a mask because of COVID, but really I would have needed to become smoke. And these messages just kept pouring into me from a short code. And then if you go forward, Alex, the challenge of it was, well, they were continuing to use this short code to just send off all these automated messages. I was having a very lengthy conversation with their customer service team about how I couldn't get there. And so there were these messages just coming from the same short code, happy stuff, automated, how to get into the house, with a really kind of deep and at some point very emotional conversation from the company about how I couldn't get in and I needed a refund and I wasn't going to show up, and it didn't make sense to continue to send me these messages. Like literally until 6 hours ahead of time, they were still sending me automated messages about how I could not have, for example, a late checkout. And I wasn't even going to go, right? And the contact center team knew that. So this is how it can go horribly wrong. It was a horrible experience. I promise you, I will never book with this vacation rental company again. It was awful, right? As they were in, like I said, and the biggest thing they did here was, one, they didn't use real-time context to know that there was a fire. They didn't know that I wanted out of my reservation. They didn't know that I wasn't going. And at the same time, they continued to use the same short code to send me messages. So it can go wrong, and you can create really bad customer experiences if you don't take into account real-time automation, real-time context, and have, somebody who's like orchestrating all of the messages going out to a consumer. Keep in mind, a customer sees a brand, they don't see a marketing department within a brand, a contact center within a brand. They just see a brand. And so at some point, you've got to have like an Uber coordination or orchestration layer to make sure that these experiences don't go wrong.
I can see that you have got over 1,000 messages, so I hope you didn't exchange all of those messages with one particular brand.
Alex. This is rich. Yeah, thousands. All right, so what it comes down to, and what I was just alluding to, is that nearly half of firms fail to orchestrate customer communication across channels. And so when we ask our, those in the same survey that we showed you before, how much do you agree or disagree with the following statement? We orchestrate customer communication across digital channels, including mobile messaging and email, and it is 11%, only 11% strongly agree with that statement. If you take in the 27%, we're like, yeah, we kind of sort of do that, right? We get up to 38%. But you've got 43% here like that. No, not at all. And, as we talked about earlier on, the use of messaging, the use of chat, which comes across to my phone as the message continues to grow. I probably talk to like 1 or 2 clients a week about this challenge that they're facing with orchestrating all this outbound communication. So I think, Alex, maybe there's just one more slide to wrap up in terms of what contact center professionals should know. We talked about, prioritizing where your customers use communication. So don't just go out and build stuff, but understand your customers, where they are on the internet, how they access it, and plan for where they're going to be. Tap into case studies and help from third-party platform providers. They work with a lot of different customers. They can help accelerate your learning curve. Start with small use cases of engagement, not volume KPIs with chatbots. So this is a lot about testing and learning. And I think if you think about the sprints that folks do within chat and refining chat are much shorter and much faster than with something like mobile app development. Consider staffing your digital channels with digital natives. Not everybody is going to feel comfortable using chat, and you've got to think about, like, again, your customer, the level of personalization they need, the tone they need, and somebody that's comfortable with that channel. You may have some professionals that are more comfortable with phone than they are with chat, so don't ignore that. And then continue to watch for unique messaging options on social media channels. And one of the advantages, again, of having a partner is all of these platforms continue to evolve. They make major notices of major releases of updates to features to their platforms, 2-3 times a year. Each of them has a development program at least annually, if not on an ongoing basis. But stay tuned. There's always going to be a lot to learn. Thanks, Alex.
Great. Thank you very much. If you don't mind, we've got a couple of questions here that actually came through, and I think it was alluding to some of the how you approach one of those channels or those new messaging channels. Question number 1 is here: should we be hesitant of certain messaging platforms due to security and data privacy implications?
So the answer is yes, and then it becomes a question of how. So on one hand, certainly these third-party platforms are continuing to evolve. So if it doesn't work for you today, that doesn't mean it's never going to work for you. And I think the second thing that we see firms doing is you may start an inbound conversation with somebody off of like Google Search or Apple Maps or one of these platforms. And at some point, the state of things are today, you may need to send them a link and shift them into your mobile app or shift them into a web experience or a browser-based experience to continue the conversation. It's always good to communicate why. And it's not that the platforms aren't safe or they're creepy or somebody's listening in. I think fundamentally, there's just some regulations that the companies are out of control. Banking and healthcare and insurance, and they will need to move folks into an authenticated environment. I think from a design standpoint, it's going to be a very, not a tricky thing, but a new thing for firms to do, to say, well, what really does somebody have to authenticate for versus what do we want them to authenticate for, because that feels safer to us. Right, so firms are going to have to kind of walk this line between abiding by regulations and offering consumers convenience and trying to find ways. They may not be able to change the regulations, but I think you can also walk things into the middle where you say, you know what, they really don't need to authenticate maybe to get a bank balance or to get the status of an insurance claim. So it's going to be, there's a lot of factors that are going to play into that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then there's actually quite a long question. I think that relates to the report. So we've got an interesting view. It was highlighted that companies should have an omni-channel communication platform. This, however, is a major investment both in terms of time and effort and budget. Would you recommend appointing a third-party messaging solution provider to implement this omni-channel platform, or would you build it in-house? Sorry, it gets longer. If a third-party messaging solution platform provider is recommended, what are the considerations when looking for credible vendors to undertake this project? So I think it's in-house versus outsourced, and then I guess it's where to start when looking for a vendor.
All right, so I'm going to tackle this. Like, you may have to just cut me off at some point, Alex. This is a very complicated question to unravel. So the first thing to know is very few of you are starting from zero, okay? Because you have a marketing team that has a marketing cloud, that has an email service provider, probably has an SMS provider, and that's already in place. Then you've got an operations team that has developers, that's working with a CPaaS provider, communication services as a platform, to get access to things like email and whatnot. If you're in healthcare, you've got a vertical solution. If you're over in the contact center, you've got a bunch of solutions. So the first thing is you, unless you're starting your company today and you have no outbound communication, you are operating, or your situation today is a pretty messy environment where you have multiple probably installations of SMS and email and push notifications and so forth, let alone whoever is the mobile app product owner who may control outbound push notifications. So you're not starting from scratch. So the reality is when you're in that scenario, you're going to say, well, you know what, now we want to add push, or now we want to add in-app notifications, or now we want to add this or that. And you're probably going to look and say, well, which of our existing platforms that we've already spent months or years integrating into, like our CRM and our data and so forth, should we tap into? And that's a really valid thing before you consider, well, who else should we bring in that's new? And so the reality of it is there are some companies that are capable of being this like Uber coordination layer. And I would say, you know, I've talked to IMI Mobile a lot about this. They're one of them, but it's still very new, it's emerging, and we don't see a lot of installations of a solution provider as that Uber coordination layer in companies with which we're speaking yet. I would say it's an aspiration, we're on a journey, that side. The thing is, though, also keep in mind that technology isn't the only answer, right? Technology alone isn't going to solve the orchestration engine, the orchestration conundrum here. You have to have people involved. You've got to have folks that are going to agree on the set of priorities. Like, if this happens, then what? What are the hierarchy of needs that our customers have, so forth. You're going to have process around that, and you're also going to have technology to help you automate that. And ultimately, one of the things that Forrester's recommending is that you do have some kind of an Uber coordination or an Uber orchestration layer. I'm going to call it not a layer, but a function that is a combination of people, processes, and technology to get this job done. Technology alone won't do it. There's too many internal politics. It's too messy.
Yeah, cool. I think there's a very valid point, and I couldn't agree more with that. I'm super excited that we're going to switch on to our panel discussion now. So thank you very much, Julie, for giving us an insight about the report that you've written and answering some of those questions. So thank you very much. And we're now going over to our panel discussion.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Julie. And with that in mind, I think we now start or jump into our panel discussion. I think we kind of want to keep it interactive as possible. So what you hear from today is just from everyone, but Gemma, we haven't heard from you yet. Would you just mind just giving us a brief introduction about yourself, what you do, what are your responsibilities with British Gas, so that our listeners can understand a bit more what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, my name is Gemma Kresk. I am a product owner for digital conversations for Centrica, and I'm actually responsible for all of our non-voice channels for customer care specifically, including the likes of social media, web chat, more recently WhatsApp, SMS and RCS, and there's a few others in there, but I certainly won't list them all. And yeah, that's my job.
Fantastic, thank you. Stuart, could we introduce you to the panel discussion as a guest?
Yeah, hi, so Stuart Jones. I am a customer service and customer experience professional. I work for Tradibi, heading up customer service. We deliver waste management, environmental services internationally. We have a large footprint in the UK, Spain, across mainland Europe, and the US. We're primarily doing B2B customer interactions, but with some pretty small businesses that kind of manifest like a B2C type arrangement. And I've got previous experience installing large-scale, complex, omni-channel platforms for big organizations.
Yes, I think it was Carillion Amy in the UK, so that should be for the UK audience. It should be quite a familiar name. Fantastic. And last but not least, Alex, could we just quickly introduce yourself to the panel?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everybody. I work with Alex. I look after the sales and marketing function for IMI Mobile in Europe, and I work with all of our clients, helping them take digital customer journeys and bring them to life and help them launch services. So that's myself.
Fantastic, thank you, Alex. So to kick off the discussion and really just to start our panel here, Stuart, could we start with you? I know you've recently joined Tradibi and you've been given the remit of basically transforming customer service and CX. And with that comes a huge challenge in mind in terms of how do you position a big project to the C-level and board members across a large organization. Could you give us a bit of an insight how you've managed to position transformation projects to senior stakeholders? Are there any ticks, any trips? What ROI metrics do you use to sell customer service improvement projects?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you always start right with what problem am I trying to solve here, and what's the benefit of the solution that I'm trying to put forwards. But more than anything, I found this on any digital transformation project or program that I'm working on. You've got to have endorsement from the chief executive. You know, you've got to have that backing straight away. So I start by, within Tradibi, we have a business strategy, a mission, and I want to say is this transformation into various different platforms? Is it supporting the mission of the business? And then I go and look at the service strategy. What service strategy already exists for customer service? And usually this focuses on retention of customers and how can my proposals for channel integration support that retention strategy? And then go speak to my friends in sales, which usually has a focus on growth in one way or another. How can this channel support growth for my friends in sales? So we start by the alignment to the strategy and spending time with the CEO. And I spent a lot of time recently looking at effectively the start of our multi-channel integration here at Tradibi. A lot of conversations with our UK CEO, and then we went up to our global CEO. We'd mapped out the whole thing. We mapped out the messy kind of journey that might happen now, the type of experience that Julie spoke about before, and we presented it in a visual way, and we talked through it. And then we talked through how that might be improved through various different channels and business processes that we might adapt when integrating those channels. Just so the CEO could go, yeah, I want that, let's go for it. And then once we've got that backing, once we've got that genuine support, the stakeholder management, setting up the right steering group, having the right governance around the project is all a little bit easier, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, fantastic. Julie, could I ask you, who are the main stakeholders that are coming to you and turning to you for advice? Is it the likes like Stuart, who are literally in charge of transformations, or are these the CEOs, the CIOs, or who comes in and asks you for advice?
So a little bit, it depends on the size of the company. So sometimes it's leaders of digital transformations who are looking below them and saying, wait a second, like this isn't going to work. And sometimes it's like folks coming to me from one corner or the other. And sometimes like a mobile product owner, like I can't because they're at the point of the stress, because a lot of organizations have like a mobile product owner, they've got like functional owners of contact center, marketing and operations, and then there's different products within a business. So it can be very complex the bigger the business gets. But I say, yeah, generally seasoned like digital transformation leaders that are looking for some evidence of this has happened before, we're not alone, how do we fix it?
Yeah, okay, great. And then Gemma, to sort of loop you in, I think you've already been through stakeholder buy-in, and I think you've got basically a mission set around that. How was that experience at British Gas and with your role and the channels that you're looking after?
Yeah, so we've gone through quite significant change from a really small web chat operation a couple of years ago to now 5 million interactions a year. So it's grown quite significantly. And our plan now is to move away from, or I suppose start giving customers more choice, from live interactions into asynchronous environments. Again, I suppose just letting customers choose the channel that's most suitable for them, most convenient, is really key for us. Hence, kind of growing out into in-app messaging and WhatsApp, and really starting to explore some of that capability. It's a little bit like Stuart in the sense of, to get it started, it was quite a challenging conversation. For anyone that doesn't know, British Gas is an energy company that's been around for a long time, and comes with that comes a lot of old technology. And sometimes, you know, when you've got people in a business for a really long time, the need to change can sometimes feel challenging. And there was a lot around ROI, and you know, what's the benefits going to be, and how can we bring cost reduction and efficiency. But what's great is we're really focusing on customer satisfaction and NPS at the same time. And it's easy to assume, right, that if you drive efficiency, you lose NPS. But actually, across all of our non-voice channels, it significantly outperforms our telephony ones, which again really helps the use case to grow even more.
Yeah, from an operational development point of view, what has been the biggest challenges? And that's maybe a question for you, Stuart and Gemma, is influencing other departments, whether that's sales, whether that's customer support, whether that's IT, dealing with the complexity around business systems, or creating new business processes when implementing new channels or new journeys. Gemma,
I don't mind. Yeah, happy to comment on that.
Okay.
So first I was thinking about, what's my job as a customer service professional? What's my job as a CX professional? And it's for years and years I was a purveyor of empathy. Getting a business to be more empathetic. But I found over recent years, I've got to become like a digital transformation professional. I've got to be measured by financial results, and I've got to speak in terms of internal success. Much like customer success externally, I've got to talk about internal success. And I think when it comes down to it, I want to make any of these integrations possible because I want it to be very, very easy for our customers to spend money with us and benefit from using our services. So I have to then think about, okay, so what's the time to value here? Internally for departments, that might be, how quickly can I speed up that inquiry to cash process and get some buy-in that way? And then equally for the customer, how quickly can I speed up the inquiry to benefit? When are they going to benefit from the thing that they're buying? So if I think about a Tradibi, that might be sales. What do my sales colleagues want? They want early engagement with customers. They want to be able to get in there, have a conversation immediately and convert into a sale. And then service professionals and operations professionals, they want this, very clear customer communication that is auditable and multimedia often, and this leads to better right first time fix. And if we get better right first time fix or delivery, then we reduce operational expenditure, cost, and potentially price to the customer. So that really helps from that point of view. And then my finance colleagues say like, get the cash in. Like, we got to get the cash in, guys. So if I can move customers from, let's say, end of month invoicing to cash payments up front from a messaging platform, then the finance guys are going to be much happier with me. So yeah, I'm going to be champion for all of those things, if that helps answer the question, Alex.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. Sort of kind of want to move on to, and Julie, you mentioned that as part of your report, you've looked at a lot of channels, right?
Yes.
Whether it's SMS, the workhorse, whether that's Apple Business Chat, whether it's Facebook Messenger, etc. What do you see? I mean, fragmentation wise, there's obviously a lot in the market and a lot for businesses to deal with. What advice would you give to anyone that looks at the number of channels that are out there? So how do you start? How do you decide what channels to look at?
So the starting point that because you're very right, Alex, there's like fragmentation from like 2 points of view. Like one, there's a lot of different, there's a lot of different places that you could place chat, so to speak. We talk about two things with consumers and the internet. One is like where you use the internet, what devices, what platforms, what channels. And the second thing is how, right? So now we're talking about the how of text-based chat. So on one hand, you've got to look at your consumers or who your target audience is and say, are they in Messenger or WhatsApp or ABC or Google or Instagram, you name it. And then the second way we see fragmentation is that consumers are going to come into these channels or platforms with different use cases. If I'm on Instagram or Facebook, maybe I've just seen a branded advertisement. If I'm coming into Apple, maybe I've come there through Apple Maps and I'm looking for store hours to set up an appointment. If I'm with Google, from Maps or search into Google Business Messaging, I could be at a different place of the purchase funnel. So, you know, there's fragmentations on multiple dimensions here. So a complicated landscape, but final answer is always start with your consumers, who you're targeting, what the use case is, what they want, and focus there first.
Yeah, absolutely useful advice. And then Gemma, I would like to switch to you, because you've done actually, you've looked at some of those things and you've decided actually to implement or test a number of channels, right? I believe you've got SMS in place, but one of the new channels that you're testing is Apple Business Chat and WhatsApp. And I'm just presenting a few things on the screen. Could you just talk us through why you've chosen to embark on those new channels? And
absolutely. Yeah, so I think Julie alluded to kind of IVR to SMS earlier on, and that was one of our first channels that we'd opened up to see, you know, do our customers, typical British Gas customers, are they comfortable moving into a digital conversations channel? And actually the uptake for IVR to SMS was quite significant, more than what we expected. With SMS, though, it's been around for a long time. There's some limitations around, you know, cost per characters, and all sorts of limitations around being able to send picture messages. And really WhatsApp and Apple Business Chat stopped all of that. There's some amazing new technology and features that we could implement using WhatsApp and Apple Business Chat. What we didn't know, though, was what would our customer uptake be? You know, we haven't done that research before, and out there's some research, but not lots, and certainly not specific to our brand or our business and our customer base. So we wanted to do a proof of concept to almost get the stakeholder buy-in from our business, a little bit to like what Stuart was alluding to earlier. In order to get the money, you need to make sure that it's obviously going to be beneficial. So we started putting Apple Business Chat and WhatsApp to test a little bit for us to find out, okay, do our customers actually want these channels? Because if they don't, there's probably not too much point us investing our time and effort in that, right? So we started by putting it on our website in two places. So we offered Apple Business Chat and WhatsApp side by side to understand what the uptake was there. And we went really quite specific. So we had two really granular use cases of pay-as-you-go customer base on a specific page that we knew exactly what they were going to come into us and talk to us about. And then also for our landlords queries, we again don't offer any other capability for our landlords at this moment in time to contact us. I think it's around booking their gas safety check. So we didn't have a self-serve journey for that. We would send out letters to our customers to invite them to book a gas safety check, and their only option was to really call us. So it's a really good deflection opportunity if our customers took up the WhatsApp route for that. The key thing with WhatsApp as well was we took advantage of the QR code. We didn't know, again, whether customers would pick up on a QR code, and at the time where we launched this, COVID and scanning QR codes was not the day-to-day thing. So I think whilst COVID hasn't helped many things, the kind of digital uptake has really grown since COVID, and people now kind of know how to use QR codes certainly more frequently than what we did. So I think if you move on to the next slide, Alex, I think it shows kind of how we implemented our WhatsApp and pages on our letter. So you can see we gave a little bit of a definition around this is how you can contact us, really encouraged customers to take this up as a channel. Of course, during winter periods, energy providers become extremely busy. So an asynchronous channel is absolutely a fantastic option for anything that isn't requiring an immediate answer. And actually we saw 36% of customers actually carry out that call to action to WhatsApp us, which was significantly more than what we ever imagined. We thought it would take off, but certainly not to that degree. And I suppose that's why I'm pleased we started small. I think it's really easy to get excited and put WhatsApp everywhere. But as soon as this gets out and grows arms and legs, you've got to make sure you've got the resource to back this up. You know, it's not a live chat. It's not going to abandon. It's not going anywhere. These customers will wait indefinitely in theory. So starting small for me was really important.
I think the important point there, Gemma, too, is when we talk about asynchronous chat, it's asynchronous for the business. It's not supposed to be asynchronous for the consumer.
It's a really good point, Julie, and we learned the hard way with that, right? So, quite happy to share that we originally thought, well, it's asynchronous, we can relax a little bit and we don't need to put as much agents on. But actually, the reality is customers then start to channel switch and you start duplicate serving. So you end up serving them in more than one channel, which can then be really quite expensive. So, yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually also an interesting point. How have you, and maybe Stuart, feel free to chip in, but how have you managed then the scaling up, the training of agents, introducing basically a new channel? Because it's a new form of communication where they previously would have talked to people, now they need to write to people. There's a various degree of inbound that's coming. I think, as you mentioned, Gemma, people expect certain responses within, I don't know, a minute minimum, right? What are some of the learnings of agent training, agent scaling, and customer actions, really?
I think, me and Stuart were talking about this yesterday, actually, in advance of the session, and we talked a little bit around square peg, round hole. I don't know if you want to go into that detail, Stuart, because it was a great example you shared yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the thing that whenever I speak to any of my counterparts on this point, everybody points out that, the person who's great on the telephone isn't necessarily the person who's great in the messaging platform. Some people are great at standing at a bar in a pub and chatting to people, other people, great at, writing a message to a friend. But these are different skills and these are different requirements. So when we were first putting messaging platforms in place, we had to think long and hard about not only what is the right training, but who is the right individual, and can we route the type of contact to the people with the right competencies in those channels. And that was almost more important than the training. Let's get the right people on this first. And that's how using technology for routing across these omni-channel sort of environments is really, really important. And then we learn, you learn from watching people who are good at this naturally. One of the behaviors that we put in place and we started to celebrate it was be human. We had these like cards to be human. You've been the most human person this week, and it was almost like a counterpoint to the automation and robotics that we were putting in place at the time, and it was becoming prevalent. It's like, you are skilled as a human being. Be authentic. Don't overgo it with the templates. Don't do the experience that Julie had before. Find a way to help. And listen. So focusing on those behaviors for me was as important as integrating the business processes into these channels.
Yeah, I think just to build on those points as well, just because somebody is skilled in asynchronous does not mean that they can then do live chat. Very, very different channels as well. And it really is about finding what your teams are good at, what your people are good at, and identifying, their skill set. I think a platform goes a long way. So some of our efficiencies, we do have multiple platforms because we have so many different channels. But whilst that's great in some aspects, it can also give us challenges, because when you're driving your agents from one platform to another, that then increases your training time. If you have as much as you can in one platform, where the training and the upskill is significantly shorter. So, we had agents on IVR to SMS in the IMI platform, and we're now growing that with WhatsApp because it's all in the IMI platform. The only thing we really needed to train our agents on was some of the niches of WhatsApp. You can now send picture messages, your customers can now send you videos. These are some of the specific things about WhatsApp that you need to be aware of. But actually the actual platform itself, they were very familiar with, so that training time took less. And so I think when you are thinking about multiple channels, really think about what technology you're going to use to achieve all of that, because the more tech you introduce, if it doesn't all fit together nicely like a jigsaw, you are going to find some challenges when you're shifting your agents from one channel to the next.
I think the other good point you bring up, Gemma, too, is that these platforms are constantly changing and adding new features. And I think ways like phone or live chat haven't evolved as quickly because they haven't needed to.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I would say as well, you know, there's not a one size fits all for an international organization by any stretch of the imagination. And we might, you know, we might have people in the UK who, you know, are typically based on Apple phones. They're familiar with WhatsApp. We get people across the world familiar with WhatsApp because it's become so popular. But then, you know, how well does that fit in Spain? Well, you know, they're not on Apple so much. You know, they're probably on Android. Are they introducing platforms like Telegram, for example? And then I introduced that to UK-based agents who might service Spain, and they're like, what is Telegram and how do I use that? And all these features are slightly different. So sometimes if you're going with something like WhatsApp, it might be that people are incredibly comfortable with it already. If you go in for something that doesn't match that geography that your service center's in, then people might need a lot more contextual training to help them understand how the platform works.
Yeah, interesting. Have you, and that's a question to you and Gemma and Stuart, have you put any new KPIs in place with your agent, or to measure basically how the adoption of those new channels and the support through those channels is being supported? Or and then how do you measure basically going forward the introduction of those new channels? So Gemma, you've launched now WhatsApp and Apple Business Chat. How do you on an ongoing basis assess the success of it?
Yeah, so some of our key measurements is certainly NPS. So we really, really care about what our customers think of us, what they think of our channels. Is it working for them? Is it working for us? So NPS was a real big one for us. We actually found that our NPS was 26 points higher compared to our IVR to SMS. And I suppose a big caveat to that is it wasn't a like-for-like journey. I don't want you to hold me to that one, but it certainly did give us a really good indication that this channel was certainly the right channel for us and our customers, and they did prefer it. Our web chat channel, again, is significantly higher than our telephony channel, but WhatsApp did still outperform our web chat one. So it does go to show that, you know, some of these asynchronous channels that customers are familiar with, you know, they talk to their friends and family with and through, does help increase brand perception, because that's a specific question around, you know, would you recommend British Gas to your friends and family, not what did you think of our WhatsApp channel. So it's really quite specific and great that that channel can have such a big impact. The second one that obviously we have to focus on is efficiency. As such a big organisation, we have to make sure that our cost to serve is good. So we really started to look at handle times. And some of the challenges we found with this was people constantly try to compare a handle time of an asynchronous conversation to a telephony conversation. And I could talk to you for ages about some of the challenges with that. But simply you cannot, you know, when you are comparing a single telephone interaction from one agent to one customer to a full length conversation of something in an asynchronous environment, those two things cannot be compared in the same way, and therefore you cannot measure an ROI based on that factor alone. There's a lot more that you need to consider, such as transfers in telephony, repeats in telephony, you know, all of that stuff, whereas a customer in a conversation can, in theory, just keep coming back on the same chain, and all of that handle time can add up. So yeah, I think our two main KPIs would be NPS and handle time.
And for you, Stuart?
I will back that up. One of the first messaging platform integrations that I did was for military families living in military housing, and they were reporting domestic maintenance ultimately. And you imagine this was typically the spouse of the serving person. You know, partner might be away, and I mean away, doing, you know, international kind of placement, and then they're living far away from their family at home. And we introduced, because it was very difficult, they had to, the serving person had to phone in the issue with the home, and all these families had migrated onto Facebook in a major way, you know, 2015, 16, 17, we're talking about when this happened. So we've got a whole load of community on Facebook, and we introduced Facebook Messenger to be able to report these issues, and it just opened up the gateway for customers to be able to engage with us in a really meaningful way and get the things fixed and be empowered. And then we were so pleased with this, and we're like, right, how do we measure it now? We need to be efficient as a business. How do we, you know, calculate our, you know, utilization and productivity and things like that? And we came up with this incredibly complicated equation. Like Einstein would have been like really pleased with it. It was taking, we were patching together time spent on interactions divided by concurrency to try and like calculate and then mix with the voice to give overall utilization within a contact center. And it was so complicated and it just fell over. It totally didn't work. It gave us really weird results that made absolutely no sense. And I'll tell you what we ended up doing. We ended up going back to, okay, what's the initial response? How quickly are we picking these messages up? What's the time to value for getting the customer what they need, what they actually want? And ultimately at the end of it, is the customer satisfied? And have we got a reduction in customer effort? Are we easy to do business with? And these measures became so much more meaningful than, the complex kind of productivity things that we tried to design. So keep it simple, I'd say.
Cool. We're sort of going quite on in it. I think that the chat questions are literally going haywire. There's quite a lot of questions in there. Margie, if you're there, my colleague Margie, would you be able to pick some of the questions up? Because I think there's some interesting questions in here. And then obviously, yeah, let's post them to the audience here, to our guest speakers.
Yeah, so let me start with one that came in through the registration. I want to make sure we get those early birds in. So with web chat, you tend to see an increase in overall contact volumes when you start as a new channel. Is this something that you expect to see with the same third-party messaging channels, or Gemma, maybe did you see an increase? And if so, is there a way to mitigate this?
Yeah, I don't mind taking that one. So you're right, there is. So you do typically find where you offer web chat kind of everywhere, customers will typically take that up even if they didn't want to have a conversation with you in the first place. But because of the efficiencies, you typically find that it will still pay for itself, and therefore you don't lose the value of web chat itself. When it comes to WhatsApp, we have again kind of condensed where we offer it, so we know that wherever we place WhatsApp, it is a call to action. It's something that we absolutely are driving our customers to contact us about. So to book a gas safety check, we know that customers have no choice but to call us because we don't have that online journey. So we haven't experienced increased volume. I think if we started to put WhatsApp everywhere without really thinking about it, i.e. put it on our homepage, then yeah, you know what, you might get some increased volume compared to customers who might have phoned you, because that's extra effort. So I think my main advice really would be strategic with it. Think about where you want to drive that contact from, be specific, and go after customers that you want to invite into this channel. I certainly would not recommend sticking it on your homepage if you're a large organisation, because it will just go big straight away.
Yep, so very use case driven.
I was just saying, Margie, I think the other thing to remember is ultimately your customers don't want to talk to you, usually, unless they're lonely. They just want their stuff to work. They want their service to work. They want everything to just work. And so, it's, but I think then once they do need to call you, it's about giving them choice and making it convenient for them.
Okay. And maybe Julie, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, Margie, I was going to say, Gemma, and probably Stuart as well, do you see a point where you start to look at all of your customer journeys and use cases and start to take those on WhatsApp journeys, such as meter reading? So that's for me seems like an obvious one. It seems like once you're comfortable with it and the customer's comfortable with it, you could start to expand the use of it.
Yeah, so we certainly are. So we're currently exploring annual service visits for customers and boilers, and we're very early stages. We're just working with you guys actually on building that out. Yeah, we're hoping to get a full end-to-end journey that's fully automated, no agent input in WhatsApp. And as customers start to enjoy that channel and build that channel out, I think the one thing we are being mindful of is A, is it the right channel for that type of journey? But then B, what knock-on impact does that have on all of our other customer service channels? So assets being key. So how many different numbers do we want for WhatsApp for British Gas that are verified? Because we don't want customers to fear that one of those is fake. But actually in the same breath, we don't want to go through, I know we keep going back to it, but Julie's journey of we're in the middle of a customer service conversation, and then in the middle of that conversation, something automated will ping on in the middle of that conversation. That's absolutely what we don't want to do. So really thinking through all of those customer journeys is quite challenging, actually, especially when you're big. So I can't even tell you how many different journeys we've got for British Gas, but we have an awful lot. And really considering, you know, what letters our customers get in, what text messages our customers get in, what conversations are they having with us via the phone currently versus text message versus Facebook. You know, it's quite a challenge to make sure you're mindful of all of those conversational points. Did that answer that for you, Alex?
Yeah.
Cool. Margie, do we have any more questions? I can see
Well,
quite
I
a bit.
have, maybe we'll take one more. And Julie, this kind of goes to your research in terms of how to maybe pick channels to choose, you know, how do you choose channels to start with, and or in your research, did you find anything that there were differences in demographics in terms of what channels customers were choosing? Say as a younger generation choosing one over, you know, a different generation picking another.
Yeah, so the answer is, Margie, 1000% yes. So the high level point is always start with your target audience and understand two things. One is where they access the internet. So what are the platforms they're on, or the devices they're on, the channels they're on. Sorry, count fingers over here. And then the other thing is when you look at text-based chat, look at their like mental or psychological commitment to it. Are they aware that it's possible? Have they adopted it? Are they using it? Are they comfortable? And then is it even a preference for them? So, you know, two dimensions you have to look at there. And then you're absolutely right. Younger consumers are more likely to lean towards text-based chat, and third-party platforms. So absolutely, it's really important to understand your customers and where they're coming from and how comfortable they are.
Great.
Great, thanks, Julie. I think, Alex, based on time, any other questions we can take offline?
Yes, and I think we'll make sure that those questions get answered to those people, and we'll link it to you or Gemma. There's quite a few questions for you, Gemma, so people are quite interested. Yes, for the last 5 minutes, and again, a special thank you for all of you for joining us today. But let's finish the session with maybe an outlook. Julie, where do you think we will be in 2025 or 2030? How is messaging shaping tomorrow's interactions?
All right, so I'd say, Alex, it's evolving on a few dimensions, and I know we just have a few minutes, so I'll be quick here. But like I said, if you need me to stay on longer, I can do that. So I think the first thing is that they need to become more natural, and when I say more natural, the conversations have to become more natural. The text has to become more natural. Like, you know, and one of the things that I really liked about what Gemma was saying is in different channels, or I think it was Stuart also, you're hiring different people who may have more of a sense or be more closer in age or demographic or socioeconomics to some of the people that you're talking to. So the style and the language and so forth that they're using will be more appropriate. Along the lines of being more natural, when we have conversations with one another, we also have our eyes and we also have our ears. So, you know, we'll say things like, I want to buy this. I want something like that. You know, what's going on over there? So absolutely, I would expect to see more use of computer vision, more use of audio. So what do you want to call that? Multimodal, like text and audio and video. I think we're going to see all of those things incorporated into chat-based conversations. The third, whether on the third or fourth thing that I listed, one of the things I talked about is the nuances of who's in on what platform and what's their use case. Are they coming in? Are they in like the branding phase? Are they in the purchase consideration phase? Are they ready to buy? Do they own a product? You know, do they have to authenticate, not authenticate? But the where chat, and I think Gemma was talking about this, as was Stuart, we have all of these customer journeys, and chat on its own isn't a journey end to end. Chat's going to be part of a web experience or an app experience or a voice experience. And how do you not only blend chat into these experiences so it's not a thing I go do, but understanding the context that you can infer based on how I get into that channel. And then I think the last thing that I would say, and the thing that we've been talking about for a long time, is intent. Chat is going to be incredibly tedious if you don't have any understanding of what the consumer's intent is. So as we look forward, if you know, and I think you look at, if I want to order pizza, you know, all I want to say is, hey, I want pizza tonight for dinner, just get me my usual thing. Alex, you have no idea what that means. You're in London, I'm in San Francisco. You have no idea what my usual thing is and what I usually order, where I order it, and what toppings I have on that pizza. But having that intent, because you know me so intimately as a consumer, or as a customer, and you're picking up signals around me. Because until chat gets fundamentally like really convenient and you understand intent, and I don't have to spell out every last thing for you, it's not going to drive the kind of efficiencies I think that companies are looking for. So chat's great, and we're on a journey, and we're just getting started. And that's what we expect to see, you know, 5 to 7 years out.
Cool, fantastic. Stuart, Gemma, one last word. Would you agree with Julie's observation and outlook?
Yeah, it's certainly from my point of view, and a lot of this is about the technology keeping up with what we want to do as a business as well. You know, so almost to Alex's point before, which is, you know, I want to make sales, I want to schedule appointments, I want to be able to do whatever the customer wants to do right there and then. And right now, you know, that's not necessarily available on all these platforms. So yeah, I look forward to that becoming available. How about you, Gemma?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't disagree with Julie. Julie is the lady in the know. It would be silly to disagree with Julie.
Okay.
But yeah, in summary, digital conversations is growing. It's not going anywhere. It's not shrinking. Customers want things quicker, faster, easier, and they have really high expectations. And I don't see that going anywhere. I think that's just the bar's just going to keep rising.
Cool, fantastic. So with that, we sort of come at the top of the hour, and I would like to thank you, Julie, for getting up really, really early.
Welcome, thanks for having me. And my cat.
Yes, exactly. I would like to thank you, Gemma. Fantastic for sharing, actually, you know, openly about what we've been doing with Apple Business Chat and WhatsApp. And thank you also to you, Stuart. Just a reminder for everyone, we will close the session now, but you will get a copy of Julie's report, popular third-party messaging platforms for customer service. And with that in mind, thank you, everyone. Wherever you are, stay safe. Have a good afternoon, good evening, and enjoy life. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.